Okay guys, we're on chapter 3, part 1. There's just 2 parts to this chapter. Just to introduce you to the chapter, we're going to look at the physiology. This is more of a biology, the next 3 chapters of nutrients. So this chapter is kind of an overview of all the different organ systems, the cell structure, so that when we look at the actual nutrient absorption, you'll have a good understanding, a review, I guess, of the body, because you probably had all this in high school. So these are the different body systems. We're mainly going to look at digestive system, but because the nutrients are absorbed and used all throughout the body, we do have to basically discuss little bits and pieces of all the different body systems that you see here. So this chapter goes through first the cell structure and then reviews each of those body structures. So we look at what the organelle is, which the smallest living system is item is an atom, and then several atoms together form a molecule, and then cells are one of the basic organelles in our body. So these, we'll look at the different parts of the cell, as you remember probably from high school, and what nutrients are absorbed where, what are stored where. Even in the cell, there's storage of different nutrients. So here's a picture of the different parts of the cell. You might remember these from previous. So the main thing we'll look at a lot is the cell membrane, because that's really important to maintain the structure of the cell. And there's a lot of fats and proteins and carbohydrates involved in this membrane. Also, we'll look at the energy source. So in the sports nutrition chapter, we'll talk about ATP, how it's formed in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. We look at the fact that there's cytoplasm, which is a water base, which requires fluid, plenty of fluid, so we can be dehydrated, and it causes our cells to become unable to function. There's protein. The DNA is where the protein is transcribed, and so we'll learn about that. So we kind of discuss throughout the chapter these different parts of the cell, and you can review them in this chapter. I think there's a few videos to look at that. But the actual cell membrane is really interesting, because if you see here in this picture, it's a double phospholipid. So these are just drawings. These are little fatty acids, these little brown things, and these are phospholipids. So these are hydrophilic, and these are hydrophobic. So there's water around here and around here. So this phospholipid can handle water. It can float in water, whereas the lipid is hydrophobic and it cannot. It separates from water, just like from salad dressings that water and oil don't mix. So it's interesting how this oil layer is protected by this water-loving layer, and that's how the cell membrane can function. So there's a lot of vitamin E in this cell. There's cholesterol in this cell membrane. There's proteins, the receptors in this membrane. You can see these protein chains, and that's how hormones like insulin are trigger these different protein chains to open up spaces so that different nutrients can go in and out of the cell. It's really an important portion for absorption and of nutrition. So we'll talk a lot about the cell membrane, and there's probably some videos about that you will see. And here's just the review. The anatomy of the cells of the membrane is for absorption and exchange of nutrients. So even like sodium and potassium and chloride, all those minerals move in and out of the cell membrane. And then the cytoplasm actually does perform some production of energy. So when you're in a fight or flight situation and need energy very quickly, your cytoplasm does produce several ATP. The nucleus we just mentioned is for gene formation, which requires the production of proteins. The endoplasmic reticulum is where lipids are synthesized. Calcium is stored in that part of the cell. The lysosomes and perosomes, that's where we have digestive enzymes that break down bacteria. And then the mitochondria we mentioned is where most of the energy is produced. So that's just the review of the cell parts. So here are the body functions. This is the other part of this chapter. We're looking at different body systems. So there's 4 types of tissues that our organs are made up of in our body systems. And one of the systems we'll look at first will be the cardiovascular and lymphatic system. So if you think about this, after you eat a meal, your food moves into your stomach, it breaks down, and then it moves into a blood system that goes to the liver. The hepatic is another word for liver. So there's a little circulation that moves right from your stomach to your liver. Your liver is your main process, your main warehouse where we put and store a lot of our glucose, our lipids, our vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins. So this is really important circulation connection between the stomach and the liver. And then the other thing, the lymphatic system is quite interesting. It's a system that we don't really understand that well, but the fats basically move from your stomach to the lymph system before it goes to the blood system. So there's another system of movement, of ways of exchanging fluids. It kind of the lymphatic system helps maintain your fluids. So if you are a little dehydrated, so that's a backup system to provide fluids when you are low. So anyway, that's the lymphatic system that we'll talk about again. You'll see some of these over and over throughout the semester. The urinary system, again, we have to depend on the kidneys, so this is going to help us filter out wastes, but it also has a lot to do with how much calcium we retain and how much we lose in our urine. So calcium is lost in the urine if we have more than we need. So the kidneys have a lot more to do than just release waste like uric acid and things from protein breakdown, but it also helps maintain fluids, sodium retention or sodium loss if we have too much sodium in our system, and the same with calcium. So that's another important system to maintain our minerals. Another system is the nervous system, and you wonder, well, what this has to do with nutrition? Well, the sodium, potassium, again, are strong, important minerals for the transmission of impulses. So you have to very, very quickly, we have basically electrical impulse moving through our body. So when we touch something hot or when we taste something, it's all about these transmissions of these minerals. And also amino acids. So if you think about the health of your brain and just the serotonin, the things that make you tired or the things that help brain function, those are all amino acids. So it's important that we have that. And cholesterol and fats are also very important for the brain. The general idea is that we need carbohydrates for our fuel, for our energy, but ketones, a kind of fat, are also very important for our brain fuel system. So fats and carbohydrates are our main fuels as we function throughout the day. And there's a picture of the nervous system. The endocrine system we're going to focus on more, just like we are the digestive system. And the main reason for that is that the pancreas, which is a accessory organ, we don't actually digest. The food does not actually go into our pancreas, but when we do eat, the pancreas releases a lot of digestive enzymes. So it has this exocrine function where it releases enzymes, but it also has an endocrine function because it produces hormones. So insulin, we've all heard of probably, is a hormone produced by the pancreas. And insulin has a lot to do with how our blood sugar levels are maintained. So this is an important part of digestion. And also if insulin, if for some reason you are low in blood sugar, the pancreas also produces glycogen. Glycogen is another hormone that will help your body release sugar from the storage center. And the storage center is in the liver. So if you don't have enough blood sugar because you haven't eaten in like 10 hours, then the pancreas triggers the release of glucagon, which will then tell your body, okay, the blood sugar is getting too low, let's pull some from the liver and get it back up to normal. So those are two of the hormones. There's other hormones too we'll look at in a minute that help with the endocrine system. And the thyroid is the other gland, that's an endocrine gland that's important because if thyroid is not functioning properly, that will affect your metabolism. So someone that doesn't have enough thyroid hormone, what's called hypo or low thyroidism, will tend to gain weight because their metabolism slows down. So you don't even think about it because the thyroid's a very small gland in your just near your voice box. But without that, you can have a big change in your metabolic rate. So that's one of the things you look at with people that are gaining weight. Sometimes it has nothing to do with what they've eaten, but it's an effect of some of their hormones. Here's a picture of the glucagon insulin cycle I just mentioned. So you want to try, our body is always trying to maintain a homeostasis or a balance of glucose in our blood system so that we have enough glucose for our brains to function and all our organs to function. But if the blood sugar is low, that's when the glucagon is released by the pancreas to raise our blood sugar by pulling it from our storage. But if we have a lot of blood sugar, if we've just eaten a candy bar or eaten a meal, then we need to take that blood sugar and store it somewhere. So insulin does just the opposite of glucagon, and it stores the glucose in cells or in the liver, or it turns it into fat. So that's the whole and part of what the endocrine system is important for. And here's a picture of when there's a breakdown of the glucagon insulin system, then we have what's called diabetes. And this is a video you can watch. And you've probably all heard of type 1 and type 2. It used to be called juvenile and adult onset. You might hear that sometimes still. So there's different symptoms for these different types of diabetes and different causes. So because type 1 was juvenile diabetes, usually it's brought on when you're a child, and it's a breakdown of autoimmune, they think, system that actually destroys your pancreas cells so you can't produce insulin. Whereas type 2, the insulin might be available, but because of resistance in your body, where somehow your cells receptors don't accept the insulin, the blood sugar maintains a very high level because the insulin doesn't work properly. So those are two of the problems that could occur if things don't work. And then here's the last review of the different hormones. So we mentioned insulin from the pancreas, glucagon from the pancreas, the thyroid hormones from the thyroid, and these two that I didn't mention yet were epinephrine, which comes from the adrenal gland, which is near your kidney, and that is, you hear about that a lot, that's the fight or flight. So if you need something really quickly, it can increase your metabolism, so your heart beats faster, your blood sugar goes up because epinephrine causes that to happen. Or growth hormones also. These come from the pituitary gland, and that's what we depend on as we grow up from childhood to adulthood. So that's the review of this first part of chapter 13. There's more slides, of course, but those are the highlights, and hopefully it will help you understand this chapter. Okay, thank you.